All right, you're here because you're wondering, how do I change my identity? Today, I'm going to share with you how you actually change your identity in real time. So maybe you're here because you want to accomplish more success. Maybe you're here because you've been stuck for so long, you're at a plateau in your business, you can't seem to get out the same cycles, and you want to make an actual real change. And you've been studying habits, you've been studying identity, you've been watching the podcast, and you're seeing how identity really determines the capacity or the level of success that you can handle in your life. So today I'm going to share with you how easy it actually is to change your identity and where these struggles that we hit, where they come up in and why they come up. So let's dive into it. So first and foremost, why is identity so important? I want you to think of this. So imagine this is your eyeball for a second, and what you focus on, your decisions, your actions, behaviors, your emotional state, your thoughts. These all stem from identity, who you believe you are. And then all of this, the focus that you overall have on life, the decisions that you make, the actions that you take, your overall behaviors, your habits, those end up creating results. So maybe that is money results. For example, maybe you have an identity of somebody who is scarcity. So believes money is hard to make, that there's not enough in the world. That's going to be your focus. Your decisions are going to be influenced based off that. So, for example, maybe there's an opportunity to invest into a project to expand your life, to expand your finances long term. But if you have that scarcity mindset, you wouldn't make that decision, for example. It's just going to influence your actions or the actions that you don't take, your behaviors, emotional state, etc. Right? Maybe it is relationships. So maybe you are stuck in toxic relationships over and over and over and over again, and you can't seem to get out of it. That is a cycle. That is because something about that person is very familiar to your past. So you keep finding yourself stuck in it over and over and over again. And somebody who actually might be healthy for you, you might reject it because it's just simply not safe. It's not most familiar. It's not known. So we reject anything that is not safe or familiar, even if it is actually the best thing for us moving forwards. Now, lastly, maybe for you, it's happiness, right? Maybe it's your mental state, so your overall mind that you're struggling with. Whatever it may be, all results in your life is coming from one thing, and that is identity. And that is identity. Your identity influences it all. Think of it again like this. I'll give you one more example. Let's say you have two buckets. One is a 50-gallon bucket, one is a 10-gallon bucket, and you have two of the same pipes. Okay. And the water is pouring out. What's going to determine what bucket handles more water? Is it going to be the pipe? Is it going to be the water flow? No, it's going to be the bucket itself. The 50-gallon bucket is going to be able to handle more water because it is built for it. Think of the bucket now as your identity. Most people, what they try to do, they want to try to accomplish more success in their lives, right? They want to hit the 50-gallon goal, but they're stuck as a 10-gallon identity. And what they'll often do is they'll try to change the pipe. Okay, well, let's make the pipe bigger. Okay, let's expand the pipe so that way water can flow out faster. Now think of this as your actions, right? You're taking harder action, you're showing up differently, you're more motivated to change your ways. But then what happens is eventually the bucket gets full and it starts to overflow. No real change happens. We hit a cap. This is our cap right here. This is called your identity ceiling. You cannot break above this identity ceiling. And no matter what kind of books you read, mentors you get, new actions you take, whatever it may be, if we do not change the bucket, the results are not going to change. And that's why if you want to change your life circumstances, if you want to change the results in your life, you need to change your identity. Because if you go outside of this level, you self-sabotage, you find yourself feeling super anxious, worried, you procrastinate, you distract yourself, you do unconscious things, you have these bad habits that show up and they drag you back to the comfort zone over and over and over again. So, how do we change identity? Well, first of all, let me share with you kind of the whole formula of how it works, and then we'll break it down. Okay, so how identity is formed is through consistent thought and emotion held over time. Neurons that fire together will wire together. So as you think and you feel it, you experience it, you start to believe it. Identity is simply just who you believe you are. So the more that you have a repetitive thought or emotion about yourself over and over and over and over and over and over and over again that activates over and over and over again, that starts to form a new identity. Then identity influences behaviors, actions, focus, etc., which then produce results in our lives, which then becomes evidence to reconfirm this new identity, this new belief system, actually. So that is kind of how identity is formed as a whole. Now, when you're younger and you grow up, though, what happens is before you have a sense of self, you're experiencing everything. And then eventually you start to form this sense of self. And then what happens that you start to make meaning of the events that happen in your life. You start to shape your experience in a certain way. You start to look at your experiences in a certain way. And that kind of forms who you think you are as well at a young age. So now the question is then, okay, well, if my thoughts and emotions held over time, when I do that properly, it starts to form my identity. Well, where do my thoughts come from, right? Where do my emotions come from? I don't know about you guys, but I used to think that emotions were random, and I had a hard time understanding myself, my emotions. Now I understand though that emotions are actually a product of something. Your emotions, you cannot experience emotion randomly. How you experience emotions that you must have an interpretation of an event that's going on to then feel an emotion. So an event happens, we have an interpretation, we give it a meaning, we have some sort of story about the event, and then we feel an emotion based off that. Now, where your interpretation comes from, though, is the same place that where your thoughts come from, because your thoughts also are not random. Your thoughts are never random, or sorry, your thoughts are not like you are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are, you think of yourself as the receiver of your thoughts. So where do your thoughts come from? It all comes from the same place, which is your core belief systems. Your core belief systems is what produces the thoughts that you receive and the emotions that you feel, which over time form who you believe you are, your identity. And this self construct is how you show up and function in the world. And it's what's producing the results, the situations that you end up in, the results that you receive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So oftentimes we think that in order to change our lives, we need to change our actions and show up differently. But most people can't stay consistent with their new actions because they haven't changed the one thing that drives it all, which is identity. This is why I don't care about focusing on getting motivation or anything like that, because when you have the right identity, same thing as strategy. I work with millionaires, I work with high level entrepreneurs, high achievers, and I never talk about strategy with them because I know that if we can shift your identity, if we can let go of these limiting belief systems that cause you to have a limited identity, if we can shift those, then you're automatically going to operate at that new level. So if you need to change the strategy, you will change the strategy because now those new ideas are in your awareness. You have a thing called an RAS, the reticular activating system. It filters 99.999% of reality out and it hyper focuses in on certain aspects of reality. And what those aspects are is literally just information, evidence to reconfirm your core belief systems. Your brain's not trying to find the truth in reality, it's just trying to reconfirm what you already believe is true. Super, super important to know that. So, if you want to change the results in your life, you need a new identity because your identity is what's going to drive you long term to make those changes. But in order to get a new identity, you need to change your belief systems. And that's why, unfortunately, it is that easy. If you genuinely want to show up differently in the world, get new results, be confident, have better relationships, have better business structure, whatever it may be, we need to change the belief systems because that is the root of the entire system that's been playing out that's gotten you where you're at right now. So that's why it's that easy. So let's break this down. All right. So if I want a new identity, I need to change who I believe I am. So the first step that you can do to changing your belief systems, okay, the first thing that you can do is first make a list of all the negative beliefs that you must have right now about yourself. So, for example, if you want to expand your business, what are your beliefs around money, around employees, around millionaires? What are your beliefs around success, around sales, around team, around control, around growth, around people, around the public, etc. And you want to go through these beliefs. And any belief that is negative. So let's say you have a belief that money is hard to make. That's a disempowering belief system. That's not going to make your journey easier to making more money because, again, your belief systems are instructions for your brain to follow. Whatever you believe to be true, your brain must go follow or take those as instructions and follow that to reconfirm that in reality. So, if, for example, I was stuck at a plateau in my business for 3 years, and I tried every single thing to break through, and nothing worked. And I had old beliefs around money that money was hard. Success is hard. Money is very hard to make. Money is very stressful to make. So what this did, looking back, what I noticed now is that there were so many opportunities to grow my business so effortlessly. Like, for example, one thing I added on to my business that really changed everything overnight was a proper retention-based program and a couple upsells in my business. And when I implemented this retention-based program, it was so easy, so effortless, but it changed my business overnight, doubling, if not more, our revenue. But I could not tap into that, or I could not absorb that information, or I could not accept that information, and actually apply it properly to my business before, because based off my belief systems, that was not in alignment. So I would ignore it. I wouldn't take the retention seriously. I wouldn't apply it properly. And I would just focus on other things, doing my same old hard ways to make money, finding myself in the same stress over and over and over again. Once I changed these beliefs and my identity, though, and I changed how I operated and I applied these new ways, more money started coming into my life in an easier way. That's how crazy it is. So that's what you want to do is you want to make a list of all your disempowering negative belief systems that you know are not in alignment with who you want to be. This can be very sneaky to find, but it takes some honest, deep self-reflection. And remember, you're not trying to find like what you want to find because it's going to be conflicting as you break down these belief systems because it might feel so real to you because it has been your personal like reality. It has been your own real personal experience, but it doesn't mean that that's universally true. So, for example, money's hard to make. A lot of us collectively have this belief system, but it's not universally true. If that was true in all levels, then concrete workers would be the billionaires, but they're not. So, there you go. You can realize, like, okay, well, that's a limiting belief then that does not serve me. So that's where you have to be careful as you're doing this work. But as you do this, as you start to rewire these limiting beliefs, like, for example, I'm scared to speak in public because people are going to judge me and hate me, right? Whatever it may be, that's a fear which is tied to a limiting belief. People are evil. Growth is hard. Growth means sacrifice. Like, if that's a belief, then we're going to reject it. We're going to try to stay away from it. I had a client one time who believed change was hard and scary. Change is bad. Change is messy, and they would reject change at all costs because we don't want that, right? The brain naturally hates change because, again, the brain's a prediction machine. It wants to reconfirm the same thing over and over and over again. So you really want to dissect these limiting beliefs that you have. Because as you start to change the beliefs that you have, what's going to happen then is you're going to start to receive new thoughts. You're going to start to think differently automatically as well. As long as you truly dissect, and this is the work that I do with my one-to-one clients. So if you're interested in that, you can apply down below for one-to-one coaching. But as you genuinely dissect the rooted disempowering beliefs, the craziest thing is that once your brain realizes that this old belief system was rooted not in truth and it can change, it changes instantly. Change happens instantly. Results is the thing that takes a little bit of time. That's, again, unfortunately, where a lot of people struggle with. But happens instantly. As soon as you change those beliefs, what is going to start to happen is you're going to start to have different thoughts. You're going to start to think differently that's in alignment with that new belief system. And then you're going to start feeling differently. You're going to start to feel differently because you're going to have different interpretations. You're going to have a different perspective. You're going to see yourself differently, your situation differently. You're going to think differently and then feel differently. And then what's going to happen is that you're going to start to change your identity. Your identity as a whole is going to start to change. And as your identity starts to change, and as you think differently and feel differently, you are going to show up in the world completely differently. And as you do that, you will start to get new results and you will find new evidence to reconfirm the new powerful belief systems that you are building. And then the system is automatically going to keep playing out over and over and over and over again. It is that easy. You might have a belief that it can't be that easy, but that is simply just a belief. Your belief system supports you unconditionally. Unconditionally. So that's how it works there. That is how it works. And as we change these pieces, everything else will start to change as well. So why do people think it's so hard then? Why do people think it's so hard to change themselves? Well, I'll tell you why. I'll show you why. Let me draw my amazing stick figures here. Okay, so this guy is aiming to accomplish some success. We'll say the success or change in his life. Okay, there he is when it's done. Look at that. He grew some hair. Okay, he wants to change his life. These are the things that you're going to have to face or you're going to face that make change difficult for people. And I'll explain why it can feel or seem so difficult. So, number one, pillar number one is you're in survival mode and your nervous system is stuck to that level. When you're in survival mode, you cannot accept change. You cannot absorb new thoughts. You cannot expand your mind. You do not have the proper creative functioning. You cannot think outside the box. You are literally in survival mode. Healing shuts down, creative thinking shuts down. You are just trying to survive. You ever seen an animal scared in a cage? They're not trying to build their dream life. They're not trying to live in an amazing way. They're literally scared to death, just trying to survive. That's it. They're in fight or flight mode. You cannot grow here. That's the first pillar that people step into is they're in the lowest of lows in their lives and they want to get to the highest of highs and they want instant relief and they try to skip all the steps to change and they don't meet themselves where they're at. And what this does is often lead them to doing drugs or these crazy things, these crazy highs that pick them up for a little bit temporarily and then they go right back down over and over and over and over and over again. The key here is if you're in survival mode, if your nervous system is stuck at this level, you need to get yourself to more so a neutral space, one small level at a time, and you will climb yourself back up. But that's pillar number one. The next one is your ego. So what your ego actually is it's not a bad thing. Your ego is simply protector of identity. Your ego is there to make sure your identity survives, so you have the structure, the sense of self to function in reality. That is what your ego does. Now, what ego does though is it whispers fear, doubt, any kind of thought or feeling pattern to just try to get you to personalize or identify with these negative thoughts, with these fear-based thoughts, so that way you collapse backwards to going back to your old self. So this happens to a lot of people when they're like, well, Caden, I'm doing the work and I'm trying to change my life and I'm trying to change, but there's no results. Nothing is working out. It's not happening fast enough. It never works out for me. I always fail. That's your ego talking because literally what it's doing is trying to talk you into staying the same. This is one of the hardest parts because most people, what we do is we identify with our thoughts. We think we are our thoughts. So every time we have a negative thought, a doubt, a fear that pops up as we're trying to change our lives, we take it as its reality. We take it as it's real and we buy into it and we collapse backwards. The key here is you must keep regulated, calm, relaxed, and not identify, not react, not personalize with those thoughts. Because if you do, you collapse back to the old identity and you stay in the same old cycles over and over and over again. So that's the second one that's going to pop up is the ego. The ego is going to fight in every way possible for survival. The next is deep fear. So you might change your beliefs, but there might be an underlying hidden belief system with a fear attached to it that's causing you to not be able to integrate this new belief. So it's like, well, I see how this unworthiness belief isn't true anymore. I'm having such a hard time accepting it. There's still some sort of resistance or whatever kind of belief it is. Maybe you rewired a belief, but you can't accept it fully. You cannot embody it fully. You cannot fully believe in it, even though you realize that the old belief system isn't true. You still can't. Usually that's because there's a deep underlying fear behind this. And usually the fear is a fear that if I do this, what if I find out this horrible idea I have of myself, this horrible fear or this horrible limiting belief I have about myself is actually true? Typically, what it is, but what you'll realize it's never true. Any disempowering belief that you have about yourself is never ever rooted in truth, which is very exciting to think about. I can promise you, any disempowering belief that you have about yourself is never rooted in truth. But there's this deep fear that pops up that will resist this change, and that is one of the pillars that we'll go through. The next one, the next one is the void. And the void is where when you change who you are, for me personally, I changed rapidly. And when you do this, this is what some people call a quantum leap. When you do this, things fall apart fast because the old structure that you built your old life off of is completely falling apart because you are operating as a new person. You are thinking, being, operating, doing, believing, seeing completely differently. So the entire structure is going to change. And this is the hardest part people have when they're trying to change their lives as well, because what happens is that you change personally, but reality does not reflect it yet. Reality still reflects your past. So maybe there's past people, relationships, conversations, situations, financial hardships, whatever it may be that you're still dealing with. But you changed as a person. That's the void. It's when reality does not reflect the changes you've made. And this is where you need to trust in the work you're doing. You need to keep moving forwards. You need to keep going through this cocoon stage because eventually, as you continue to show up, act, and be differently, new results will start to produce. Right? The same day that you plant the seed is not the same day that you eat the fruit. You must give it time. And as you do so, you will exit this void. And as you exit this void, reality will start to reflect the changes that you made. So that's really the hardest parts. But if you look at it, all it's connected to is typically us going back into an animal state. And what I mean by that is the void. What that means is that there is no certainty. So probably you lack trust. You trust that things aren't going to work out. You don't trust in yourself. You lack confidence, whatever it may be. These are all things that we can build, by the way, right? Maybe deep fear would be we're in survival. We're not having an open mind. We're not reflecting. We're not relaxed, right? Ego is where you're not being a student. You're trying to be right instead rather than hold the truth. You are not observing. You are reacting, etc. Survival mode, same thing. We're reacting. We're not coming from a calm, relaxed state, which most of these things can be changed or worked through much easier if we practice things like meditation. Meditation allows you to see that you are not your thoughts. It helps you to stop reacting to those thoughts. Working out and exercise, what that does is it tames your mind. It exhausts your body, tames your mind. So you're more relaxed. You can think better. You can think more properly, more clear. You're more confident. You're building trust in yourself that you are someone who shows up and puts in the reps to get the results that you want, even if there's no results for a long period of time, right? You build that trust and that confidence. These are things that can all be built that we can work on. So when we make these changes, the changes happen 100 times easier. But also simply just having a simple trust in the universe and how things work out. Understanding that if you do your part, which is keep in a calm state, right? Change your belief systems whenever you enter into resistance or try to see it from a different perspective or learn a lesson or whatever it may be. Keep yourself in a calm, relaxed state. Believe that everything's happening for you. Take the actions that you need to. Keep your attitude right. Keep your focus right. Hold that new state. New state as a new identity, which is the new thought and emotion pattern, right? Hold that new state and act off that state. And as you continue to do that, you will start to get new results. So moving forward today, what you can do is if you want to change your identity, so that way you can eventually change the results that you get in your life, the number one thing that I would love for you to do is step into the new thought plus emotional state. Okay. And then what you want to do is act off that state. And as you act off that state, what's going to happen is resistance will show up. Now, resistance might be simply just fear, and you might simply just need to keep acting and moving through it. Or resistance might pop up as a negative thought or feeling. And then you can rewire the belief, step back into the new thought plus emotional state, take action, gather evidence, and then eventually you're going to get results. Oops. There we go. So, identity, you want new results in your life. So, you want to step into a new thought and emotional pattern as if you already have the results, as if it's already done. As you step into that new thought and feelings state, then you act off that state that is in alignment. Then as you continue to act, resistance is going to pop up. And if it's a negative thought or feeling pattern, then you can dissect it and see if there's some beliefs to rewire or work through. Then you step back into that new state, you take action off that new state, you find more evidence for why it's good, and then eventually as you keep going, you will start to get new results. And then as a bonus, you can work on meditation, you can work on exercise, you can work on yourself, not identifying with your thoughts so much, et cetera, et cetera. And I promise you, as you do this, you will be a new person and you will start to get new results in your life. Now, guys, if you did like this new style training, let me know down below in the comments if you like it when I draw things out as I speak. There was a few glitches in the training today, so I hope that did not mess up on the screen. And also, if you want to apply, if you are a high level, high achiever, or you are a high level professional, or you're an established entrepreneur who is struggling to make a breakthrough in their lives, you can apply for one-to-one down below as well. Thank you guys so much for being here, though, and I will see you guys on the next training.